I knew something the whole time. I'm thinking in my mind when they convicted me and when I was over at Ellis, I knew about the police officers, you know, being suspects and all this stuff, you know, by the time the trial, you know, after the trial and all. And I was still trying to place where did those police officers come in? It wasn't until I got over here at this unit was when I saw that DNA lab report in the state's response to my writ.
The cans were bright and shiny. They were laying on top of everything. There were no leaves on them. They have not been sun faded in any way. And secondly, as you can see, this road is a pretty dusty road. And if those beer cans had been there any length of time, there would have particularly the one that was crumpled, would have had dirt in the creases. There wasn't any dirt in the creases. Those were fresh beer cans.
That report never got to the defense lawyers, okay? The prosecution insists that they certainly had it. They knew about it. They didn't think it was very important, but if they didn't get it to the defense, it wasn't because they didn't mean to.
Somebody should be able to recall some information that detrimental to the case, you know what I'm saying? Something that's incriminating two suspects, namely police officers, you know? I know that they just lied about that, you know, pointing the finger at each other to try to cover that, you know.
I've gotten, you know, these letters that came out in the paper on DNA, you know, testing a beer can and it having David Hall and Ed Somola's DNA on it. I know everybody's heard that. Number one is I want to know what two police officers are doing drinking out of the same beer can. That, you know, to me, that's just absurd. I feel, I'm not sure, but I feel that could have been placed on the scene for further if someone got out of line.
I remember there was a time where Stacy, she would come with marijuana and wanted me to trade it, you know, wanted to trade for cocaine, crack cocaine. And I was wondering where was she getting all this marijuana? And I remember her telling me, Edward. She said Edward. And I know Ed Samela by Ed. You know, when you mention Ed, you say his name Ed. Everyone know who you're talking about, Ed Samela, which he was over narcotics, you know, the narcotics division down in Bastrop. When she said Edward, I was thinking several other people that I know by that name, and it didn't dawn on me that it was him until it came back that he was one of the suspects.
12-year veteran Ed Salmela was fired from the Bastrop Police Department 2 days before his death. The reasons behind his firing and the events that led to his death remain questioned by those who were close to Officer Salmela.
I had to do the cleanup after my brother's alleged suicide. The couch was removed from my brother's apartment. They said it was too unsightly for us to see. I got a call from the laundromat where there's a young lady who folds clothes, washes them and folds them for you by the pound. Said that my brother dropped some clothes off down there. I went down to pick them up and said that he had arrived at the dry cleaners, or at that cleaners, it's about 7 o'clock, 6:30 to 7 o'clock. Dropped them off and said that he would be back in an hour to pick them up because he was going back to Louisiana to see a girl and do a little more gambling because he still had vacation time. And I guess at this time, he knew he'd already been fired, but he was getting paid out on vacation. So he was going to go back there and just kind of live it up a little bit. And approximately an hour later, he went to a pulse machine there at the bank and had made 3 transactions for $600, which is $200 per transaction. That money and those transaction slips were still sitting in his console of his truck. Approximately 30 minutes later, the man's dead.
From what I understand, the Texas Ranger, the same investigator that was investigating this case, Texas Ranger Warlow, Rocky Warlow, he was investigating Samela's death as well. And they said that they ruled his death as a suicide. but in the autopsy reports and everything, that there was no gunpowder residue on Ed Salmela at all, on his hands or nothing like that. And there was the perfect muzzle imprint, the entrance wound at the top of the left side and the bottom of the right side of the head. And I just can't see there with them saying that he committed suicide and there not being any gunpowder residue. I find that hard to believe, you know. Gunpowder residue just don't up and leave, just doesn't walk away.
The investigation on my brother's death, I do not believe was handled correctly. The Bastrop Police Department came in, understand, and went to the scene and decided that it was one of their ex-police officers or police officers. Therefore, they backed out and called in the Texas Rangers. And the lead investigator on that was a man by the name of Rocky Wardlow. Now, I don't know if anybody else knows, but Rocky Wardlow had been going through a divorce a few months earlier and was actually a roommate of my brother. He needed a place to stay. Therefore, I felt Rocky Wardlow should have stepped back as the lead investigator on that instead of going forward with it. I believe that was handled all incorrectly. My brother's being shot with the left hand is bogus. My brother couldn't do anything with his left hand. He shook too bad. My brother was right-handed. I mean, the evidence is laying there. I do not believe they investigated anything, or they would have found the laundry, the money slips. They you know, when an officer or so-called a soon dismissed officer, I believe should have been investigated a lot more. I think they investigate a regular homicide more than what they would have done my brothers, because they came to a conclusion the minute they walked in the door. I believe my brother got into something and found out way too much, is my feeling on my brother's case. And he was actually sitting back trying to figure out how to go and resolve this, and ended up not being in this world anymore. I believe he had some information that was incriminating to maybe some other officers, maybe not in that county or in another county, that actually led to his death. Yes. Myself, I don't believe they have the correct person in prison over the Stacy Stites murder. And I do believe that if they find out, or if it's found out that somebody else had killed Stacy Stites, they'll find out in my mind who killed my brother.
In November of 2005, the U.S. Western District Court ordered a rehearing of several issues regarding Rodney Reed's conviction, including suppression of evidence during his trial. The hearing was scheduled for March 2006.
That's what the jury found, and that's, you know, if the appeals process finds something was not right in that process, then I hope they find it.
To meet somebody like that and then have her taken away without being able to say goodbye, especially in this situation when there's so many sides of everybody's story, you know, what's to believe, you know? All I know is that she's not gone, and she won't be gone until, you know, something's done about this.
I mean, that's unfortunate, but I believe that that they will affirm and that he'll die.
I believe every man has a conscience, and actually every man has a good part of that conscience. And sooner or later, it will get the best of him, and someone will come forward. And it may not be another 20 years, but I do believe in time everything will come out.
As far as executions, I try my best to keep that out of my mind. I'm not looking in that direction, you know. I'm seeing my children. I want to, you know, be with my family. That's what I'm looking at.